The pillow struck Will right in the face. Unharmed and unsurprised, he peeled the soft weight away with a giggle and dropped it over the side of the bed. "Stop it, Kev," he said, though his continued laughter robbed the command of any real force. "We have to get to sleep so Santa will come." His brother's second pillow arced through the air to land, unerringly, on Will's face. Will grabbed and wrestled with it like it was attacking, all the while using it to muffle snorts of laughter. Across the room, Kevin stifled his own mirth. Santa may have been able to see them while they were sleeping, but they didn't want Dad to hear that they were still awake. With that sobering thought, Will lobbed the pillow gently across the room, aiming for Kevin's feet. "We really do have to go to sleep. I don't want to miss out on Santa because I'm still awake when he comes by." He rolled onto his side to emphasize the point, turning away from his older brother. He curled his legs underneath him and jammed a knuckle into his mouth, biting it to make sure he stopped giggling. For almost a minute, the only sounds were made by Kevin, stealthily retrieving that first pillow from the floor. Then, so low Will nearly couldn't hear him at all, Kevin spoke. "You know, Santa isn't really coming tonight." A chill that had nothing to do with the cold wind blowing past their bedroom window touched Will's heart. "What do you mean?" he whispered, the words sounding harsh as he flipped about to face Kevin. "I've been good. Me and Mom went over my list, and she said I didn't ask for anything too big. I asked the helper Santa we saw at the store, and he said I've been good, and I even sent a letter to the North Pole and got a letter back saying I've been good. What are you talking about?" Kev sat up in the bed, the dim glow of the SpongeBob nightlight enough to show his serious expression. "It's not you, dude. You didn't do anything wrong." The tightness in Will's chest started to relax, but that chill turned into a bellyful of ice at his brother's next words. "It's just Santa isn't real is all." Now, Will was just 6, but Kevin was 10, and he knew things no 6-year-old ever knew. Will learned a lot from just watching and listening to his older brother. Mom told people he looked up to Kevin quite a bit, and that may have even been true. But Kevin was still a 10-year-old and an older brother. He was not above playing a trick or three on little brother from time to time. In fact, had anyone ever asked Will, not that they ever did, but if they did, he would have told him his older brother's main source of entertainment was playing jokes and tricks on Will. "That's what it has to be," he thought. "A joke. He'll laugh in a minute and tell me I'm a doofus." But Kevin didn't say anything. He didn't poke Will, didn't throw the pillow again, didn't even smile as far as Will could tell. He just lay there, looking at Will. Finally, Will could take no more of the silent stare. "What are you talking about?" He tried to keep his voice from doing that scared little quivery thing, but he heard it in there anyway. Of course he's real." But Kevin shook his head before Will had even finished speaking. Not fast or excited or angry or anything, but slow, like their dad did when something was really serious. "No, he's not. It's Dad." For just a moment, Will pictured their father at the North Pole, wearing the famous red suit, the front of it stuffed with a big soft pillow, giving last-minute orders to the elves loading his sleigh. "Mom, too," Kev went on, "but it's mostly Dad, I think. They get the presents and stuff, and he sneaks them out there after we go to bed. Then in the morning, they just tell us it was Santa." "That's not true." It was a loud, angry whisper, only a half step away from shouting, really. "Mom told me there's a Santa Claus, and she wouldn't lie. Not like you." Kevin was unfazed. "You remember last month when Mom took you to see Dr. O'Shea? When the doctor said you had to have a shot, what did Mom tell you?" Will's face felt warm, and his eyes felt hot, and that flippery thing hanging down at the back of his throat felt huge and choky. He swallowed twice, moving that big choky thing around a bit, then took the biggest chance he could recall taking in his whole young life. "I don't remember." He'd forced a lie out past the choky thing. A lie on Christmas Eve, when Santa, he's real, I know he's real, was sure to be watching. Kevin wasn't fooled for a second. I was there, remember? She said it wouldn't hurt, didn't she? Will nodded, slow and miserable. Did it? Well, it had hurt. It had hurt like a hot coal on his arm, like 100 billion mosquito bites all at once. And he had yelled and cried and hadn't stopped until they left Dr. O'Shea's office and went up the street for ice cream. But he'd already lied outright, right there on Christmas Eve. Will didn't think a small fib would hurt him at the moment. A little. Kevin was nodding along with him now. So she lied about that. Will said nothing. The stupid choky thing in his throat probably wouldn't have let him any, even if he tried. And if she lied about that, then she could be lying about this, right? Will wasn't nodding his head anymore. He felt tired, exhausted, the way he always felt after a great big cry, the kind with snot bubbles and the breathing, the kind of cry that usually went on until Mom hugged it away, even though this time he'd swear only a couple of tears had rolled down his face in the dark. He flopped away from Kevin, lay flat on his back. His eyes felt like a thumb in the cartoon when someone's hit it with a hammer, all swelled up and throbbing. He could hear them throbbing, just like in the cartoons. He forced the lids down over his cartoon thumb eyes, even though that squeezed out new tears that ran down across his cheeks and made cold spots on his ears. Mom didn't lie. He's coming. The voice didn't sound like his own at all, and seemed to quit before the words were out, making coming sound like Kopic. He still heard his cartoon thumb eyes throbbing, and that might have been why he didn't hear Kevin moving. But the next thing he knew, there was a hand on his shoulder. It was a hand that had pinched and poked him, even punched him once, a hand that occasionally gave out the wickedest Indian burns, but this time Kevin's hand gave nothing more than a gentle shake. Hey, Will, I'm not trying to be mean. It's just the truth. Will pulled away from the hand, turning toward the wall and pulling the covers up over his head. It's not. Mom didn't lie. He sniffed prodigiously. You're just trying to trick me, and that's dumb, because it's Christmas Eve and Santa's watching. You're going to wind up on the naughty list for sure. The hand found his shoulder again. You're going to have to learn this sometime, and I'm getting kind of tired of pretending. You think I'm lying? That I still believe in Santa? All right. Come on, I can prove it to you. They crept down the hall on silent feet, right past their parents' bedroom door. Will's occasional sniffle the only sound. Kevin didn't even shush him. He simply pointed to Will, put a finger across his lips, and made a ringing out motion with both hands. Will understood. If he kept making noise, Kev would give him an Indian burn. Maybe not right now, but Kev never forgot about giving burns. Will muffled his sniffles and thought, yep, he's on the naughty list for sure. They tiptoed into the kitchen. Light spilling in from the hall nightlight augmented the trio of electric candles glowing on the windowsill. To help Santa find us if there's fog, Mom says. And why would she say that if filling the kitchen with dim light? Will had no problem seeing Kevin turn and indicate the table with a grand flourish. A flourish like the amazing Presto, the magician they'd gone to see over the summer. He also had no trouble seeing what lay on the table. A plate of cookies and a glass of milk. What are you? Will began, but Kevin cut him off. Santa's milk and cookies, right? Will nodded. He'd picked those cookies out with Mom's special for Santa. Sugar cookies with pictures on them. Christmas trees and reindeer, and one with an image of Santa himself, sack on his shoulder. They'd put them there so the big, jolly man could have a little snack during his long night's work. They did it every year. Kevin picked up a cookie, still with that showy magician's flourish. Would I do this if I really believed in Santa? And with that, the amazing Kevo began to make the cookies disappear. He munched them down one by one, eating silently until the last cookie. For the last one with a picture of Santa on it, he made quiet Cookie Monster sounds, num num numbing, until there was nothing left but crumbs on the plate. And then he reached for the milk, a big tumbler Will had to hold with both hands, and glug-glugged it all away, pawing at his cheek when a little rivulet of moo juice jumped the side of the glass and tried to escape across his face. He placed the empty glass next to the empty plate with a quiet, ah, wiped a pajama sleeve across his mouth, and looked at Will. There. Do you think I'd do that if I thought Santa was real? Seriously? No. There was no way Kevin would do something like that if he thought Santa was real. No way he'd do something so in your face like that to Santa, with no way to say it was an accident or a mistake. He was a little mean sometimes, but he wasn't dumb. He wouldn't give up his only chance to get toys and stuff for a joke or a trick, even when on Will. But that means Kevin really doesn't believe in Santa, and Kevin's 10, and he's smart, and he knows stuff, and Mom didn't lie about the shot. But that means... So, we can go back to bed before Dad wakes up to sneak our presents out here and finds us, said Kevin. He leaned a little closer. Or do you still believe in Santa Claus? Will stood there, sniffling for a while. To heck with the burn. And his answer, when it finally came, was in a whisper so low he barely heard it himself. I guess not. As he said the words, he felt something deep inside him, way, way down, where he kept things like his memories of Mom back when she was Mommy and Dad when he was Daddy, where he kept how he really felt about Kevin, because he'd get teased if he told his older brother he really loved him. Buried deep within his willness, where he kept all the important things, he felt one small, fragile thing, as brittle as a crystal snowflake, break with a silent snap. There was a sudden, loud thud. Kevin whirled to face the bedrooms, probably afraid it was Dad, though it hadn't come from that direction at all. Will thought it had... The thud came again, louder, from the roof. The boys looked at each other. What the heck was that? Kevin began, but Will cut him off with a short, breathy scream, finger pointing toward the window. Pressed to the glass just past the trio of bulbs and the electric candles was a hideous face. The brows were thick, dark in contrast to the white skin, and rising high above the wide eyes that stared in through the pane with a wild, brilliant blue gaze. The nose was wide and flat, made flatter as the face pressed to the glass, spreading across one cheek like a weird stain above a wide grin filled with sharp, triangular teeth. Kevin had apparently given up on sneaking around, because the yell that came out of him was so loud it snapped Will's attention away from the thing at the window. Dad! Without warning, the door leading out to the back hall exploded inward, split down the middle, one half spinning away across the room as the other smashed against the edge of the counter and fell to the floor. The brothers screamed as, from the darkness it seemed to pool out in the hall, a huge, hairy leg, ending in a cloven hoof, stepped across the threshold, landing so hard Will felt it in his feet. In the stunned silence that followed, Will, too terrified to make a sound, clearly heard a clank, then a jingle like Christmas bells. He had time to think Santa's sleigh before the huge figure followed its hoof into the kitchen. It seemed to unfold into the room, opening like some dark and terrible flower until it was taller and wider than the doorway itself. It stood on two legs like a man, but it was not a man. The legs it stood on were animal legs, covered with thick black fur and bending backward at the knees like that Mr. Tumnus, the faun in the movie about that magical wardrobe, but these were huge. The shaggy hair covered the whole beast. Long gorilla arms hung from shoulders humped and thick with so much muscle, the head thrust forward and down, in front of those shoulders rather than sitting atop them. Even though the head rode low on the creature, its horns still swept up above the head, above the bull-like mountain that was its back and shoulders, to score deep furrows in the ceiling above. Below the horns, the face was the only bit of the thing not covered in hair. It was a big face, a long face, as if someone had taken the faces of a man, a horse, and goat, and only kept the worst bits of each. Round red eyes glared from beneath a heavy brow. shining in the dim kitchen with a light all their own. Huge, square nostrils flexed as the thing scented the air, and the narrow, elongated mouth hung open, the lower jaw dangling as a tongue, longer and redder than it had any right to be, lolled from between thick, sharp teeth. One hand came up, pointing at the brothers, standing rooted to the spot with what looked to Will like a whip, the long lash hanging down to coil on the floor at the thing's cloven feet. "Destroyer!" The voice sounded like Grandpa Willis's cough, the one he always did right before Mom told him the smokes would kill him someday, deep and wet, and like something down in his chest had come loose on one side and was flapping about in there. Rattling. Just hearing it made Will's stomach lurch, and he might have thrown up right on the spot if not for the blast of cold air that hit him as the kitchen window slid wide open. The thing from the window landed lightly in front of the counter, with a deep, menacing chuckle, bent legs absorbing all the shock. Will registered wide shoulders, arms and legs so burly and powerful the thing was bandy-legged, and the shocking fact that it was no taller than he. Then the big one was moving, taking long strides to the other side of the kitchen table, a strangely fluid movement for a thing so huge. One long arm moved across the table, and the thing backed up half a step. There, on the plate that had once held snacks intended for Jolly St. Nick, was a candle, flickering in the breeze from the open window. The candle was thick and black and stood in the center of a small, severed human hand. "Destroyer!" the thing repeated, that terrible rumble bringing Will's gorge up again. The whip was leveled once more, like a teacher using a pointer in school, but now the thing stood close enough that they could see exactly what it was pointing at. Kevin. "I come for you." Even with the chill night air coming in through the open window, Will could smell the sharp, acrid stink as his older brother, king of the flinching game and master of the Indian burn, emptied his bladder. "What?" Kevin's voice was a high, terrified shriek, but it was more than Will could have managed right then. "Who are you? Dad?" That last was a scream cast over his shoulder toward the bedrooms, his gaze never leaving that pointing whip. "No aid will come, scream though you might. Answer to Krampus you will on this night." Krampus? Who's Krampus?" Wide nostrils flared as the thing leaned down, huge face looming over the boys, and Will detected the scent of smoke coming from the thick fur. Not wood smoke like from a fireplace, or when they went camping, but a bitter, nose-stinging smell like burning plastic. With the thing this close, he saw the source of the jingling. Wrapped about the huge torso, crisscrossing the powerful chest like the bandoliers on the Frito Bandito, were chains, the links of which were hung with bells, tarnished nearly as black as the thick fur almost burying them. The smaller creature began its evil chuckle once more. "I am Krampus, punisher of children. For the crime of destroying belief, I, Krampus, the stalker of night, find you guilty." The hand, now empty of the candle, reached to the chain wound about its waist and pulled loose a large canvas sack. Krampus, ignoring Will, leaned still closer to Kevin, the breath from that great horsey mouth actually ruffling Kevin's eyelashes. "You're coming with me." Will couldn't see into the sack, held out as it was toward his brother, but Kev could, and did. And what he saw within the depths of the big bag in front of him caused his mouth to drop open nearly as wide as that of Krampus himself. Out of that wide-open mouth caroomed a note of purest terror, and he wheeled about and fled toward the hall leading to the bedrooms. With a casual, almost negligent movement, the hand not holding the sack went back, then came forward in a side-throwing motion. Rather than a ball, the business end of Krampus's long whip went snaking through the air toward Kevin's back. It was a narrow space, however, and the lash struck the edge of the doorframe just as Kevin turned in the hall, screaming for their father the whole way. Roaring like a steam train with chest congestion, Krampus went after him, bells jingling as he slowed at the door, forcing his great bulk through the opening into the close confines of the narrow hallway. Will took a step or two after him, not knowing what he was going to do, but that thing was after his brother, and his mom and dad were down there too. That was when the small one, the one with the white face, stepped in front of him, blocking his path.
No, now that's nothing for good you to see. You need to stay here in the kitchen with me.
Will backed away from the creature and watched him go, rubbing its oversized hands and grinning with delight, those shark-like teeth protruding farther out from its lips. A gust of wind blew through the kitchen, and the tear tracks down Will's cheeks felt like ice. Who are you? What's going on? Those blue eyes, so pale they were almost white, lit up, and the wide smile widened, that jagged grin letting out a high, sing-songy voice.
Santa you know, for he brings about toys, but Krampus, he comes for the bad girls and boys. And just as Santa has a helper, an elf, I come along to help Krampus myself.
But why? To his surprise, the ugly little man did a happy little dance. Will noticed then that though the creature was dressed all in gray leather, his 2 big feet were clad in white Nikes, and answered him.
The Krampus has come to cause pain, to cause grief, and all of it based on one small thing, belief. And before you start cursing the thing that we do, you should know the believer who called us was you.
Will gaped at the sneaker-clad horror. Me? I didn't call anybody. I don't understand.
There is one thing left that a child can't do. The thing that brought Krampus here, now, to you. Believing in Santa must fade on its own. For helping it die, helpers must atone. Deep down within you there once was a spark, but your brother did smother it, leaving you dark. From the South Pole we came to take Kevin back to the Krampus's lair in his kid-taking sack.
The white Nikes did another little happy dance as the thing clapped its hands in delight. In the background, Will heard Kev yelling for help while Krampus bellowed, wordless sounds of rage.
My favorite part when the kids try to run. They scream and they kick. When I fetch, it's great fun.
Will listened to this capering little monster in growing horror, thinking he understood, but... You mean you're going to take Kevin away? The white face nodded, black hair jouncing. Forever? The hair continued its up and down bob, the odd eyes creasing almost shut with the width of the grin. Will tried to dart around the thing, to get to the hall, maybe wake his parents, though how they were sleeping through all this noise he had no idea. The nightmare in Nikes darted sideways, cat-quick, still blocking his path with those muscular arms. He tried a different tack. Dad? Mom? Help!
Shout all you wish, for no one will hear. Not as long as the Krampus candle stays near.
One of the big hands gestured toward the table, and the candle in its horrible 5-fingered holder. Will had all but forgotten it in his fright. What? What is that thing?
Children taken by Krampus all cry a lot, and their tears we do catch and then keep in a pot. When they wear out and can no longer work, we take all their hair, pull it off in one jerk. The hair is all woven into one wick-like string, and then into the tear pot to steep goes the thing. While the wick soaks up all of the tears they surrendered, their flesh into a nice little tallow is rendered. Tallow and wick make a candle quite black, and then it comes hunting along with the sack. So long as the Krampus candle burns in that hand, no one in this house may leave Sleepyland.
The whole time he'd been talking, the little creature had shuffled forward with a slow, rolling gait, and Will had backed away, trying to keep his distance. The thing was looking Will up and down in a way he did not like, and when it finished that little speech, it inhaled through its nose, leaning forward as if taking a big sniff. I don't understand, Will shouted as his back met the wall beside the splintered doorway.
The best part, I think, of the Krampus candle, so black,
said the thing, pausing to lick those triangular teeth with a tongue as black as the candle itself,
is that when it's all done, I get the bones for my snack.
It leaned forward again, nostrils flaring, and its bright eyes closed as it took the biggest sniff of all, then exhaled in a long sigh. The eyes opened, staring at Will with an expression again. And this time, the boy recognized it. The bandy-legged little nightmare with the mouth filled with shark's teeth was hungry.
Winzel!
The eyes popped open, mouth snapping shut so fast the teeth nearly cut off that flopping black tongue, as the menacing little figure stood straight and spun about. Will looked past him to the dark, hulking form of Krampus, red eyes wide with rage, squeezing his way back into the kitchen.
The brat has gone under his parents' bed where I cannot reach.
The long, shaggy legs carried Krampus into the kitchen proper, hooves grinding into the linoleum. The whip pointed back toward the hall.
Winsel, fetch!
The hungry terror, the Winsel, launched itself forward with a low growl, dropping down to run on all fours like some scuttling monkey. Will caught a flash of white as the Nikes rounded the corner. Then the Winsel was gone. His view of the hall disappeared behind a wall of black fur as Krampus stepped up to the table, tucking the coiled whip under one of the chains. Kevin's cries for help became wordless shrieks of terror as the Winsel joined him under the bed. Krampus turned from the table, one hand holding the sack, the other the Krampus candle in its terrible holder. His blazing eyes fell on Will, and they narrowed.
I came for one child, but here I find two. Oh, whatever shall Krampus do?
The voice still sounded like it came through a throat filled with maggots, but had become lilting, teasing. Krampus leaned forward, much as the Wenzel had, staring into Will's eyes.
My counterpart's power wanes faster than mine, and faster every day. Would it be right to take one little boy but leave one behind? A witness? No. That cannot be right.
The candle came down, hovering next to Will's face as the huge figure crouched low to look close.
What say you, young Will? Will you leave your brother, your only brother, to fend for himself in my care? Or shall I take two?
Behind the Krampus, in the doorway to the hall, a grinning Winsel appeared, bearing the struggling Kevin in its powerful arms. The sight was blotted out once more as the long, terrible face leaned still closer, and Will choked on Krampus's foul breath as the flame came so close it nearly scorched his cheek.
What say you, Will? Have you been naughty?
No, said Will, and he blew out the candle. He hadn't been sure what would happen, hadn't understood all of what the Winsel had told him, but he'd understood the candle was important. He hadn't known how important. The great red eyes went round as a grunt of surprise, rancid and hot, washed over Will's skin.
No!
From down the hall, a new commotion began, barely audible over Kevin's screams for help. The sounds of a father and mother, parents, flashed through Will's mind, waking up to a disaster. Kevin? Will? What's going on? The Krampus stared at the smoking wick for an instant, then whirled, its hips striking Will, pinning him to the wall and smashing the breath from him.
You!
The deep, clotted voice was accusing and angry, and past the hairy bulk in front of him, Will saw the Winsel's eyes widen in fear.
I'll cut out your waggling tongue for this. How many times do I have to tell you?
Boys, where are you? Their mother's voice coming from the bedroom.
No time,
said the Krampus, folding out the sack. The Winsel all but hurled Kevin into the mouth of the bag, and the Krampus drew the drawstrings tight, leaving Kevin's bare feet sticking out, kicking frantically. His muffled voice came through the burlap, words mixing in between terrified sobs. Help! Oh God, help me, Will! Dad, please, somebody! The Winsel leapt to the open window, perching nimbly upon the sill, as the Krampus spun back to Will, teeth bared in a razor-sharp snarl.
You defied me. Me! I'll not forget you, believer.
Krampus turned to the door as the Winsel shot Will a reproachful look from its spot on the sill, a look that said, That goes for me too, I'll remember you, before ducking down and out into the night. A cyclone suddenly hit the kitchen, a hurricane, all the wind blasting out through the door and window. Outside the window, the Winsel disappeared, while in the kitchen, the Krampus ducked his head and was blown right through the door by the great exiting wind. The smashed flinders of door were caught up by the blast, flying through the air, the larger pieces bouncing along like big wooden tumbleweeds. As the last of the cyclone left the room, the door reassembled itself right in front of Will's eyes, all the pieces sucked into place by the wind and then slamming shut like a plug in a drain. Will heard a faint cry and looked to the window. The exiting air had tried to suck the open window closed, but at the last instant, one of those 3 tall electric candles, to help Santa find us if there's fog, Will remembered, had tilted back, started to fall, and had gotten stuck in the closing window, propping it halfway open. "Will, please, help!" came the faint and faraway voice, carried through the stuck window on the cold night breeze. He shouted back through the window, his voice hoarse with tears. "Kevin!" "Will?" It was his father, finally coming into the kitchen, unbelted robe swirling like a cape in the draft, hair and eyes wild. "Will, what's going on? Where's Kevin?" "They took him, Dad! They took him!" That was all he could say before the world dissolved into uncontrollable tears. The rest of the night went by fast and slow at the same time. Dad yelling and crying, Mom hysterical, neighbors in the back hall, the same hall that Krampus had used, wearing concerned faces. A man in blue doctor gloves listening to his heart and putting that super tight cuff thing on his arm, shining a penlight in his eyes. Police in the kitchen, dusting this and collecting that. A man in a suit who showed Will a badge and asked him questions. And Will tried to answer the questions, but the man didn't want to hear his answers. Another man, another suit, another badge. The same questions. Will gave the same answers. "I can't get anything out of this kid that makes sense," said the second suit. "Paramedic said he's in shock," said the first suit. "Let's just let him rest. We can try to question him tomorrow if this thing hasn't resolved itself by then." Then he was in bed, listening to police and parents, all talking and talking. It felt like forever. Mom had hugged him, kissed him. Dad, too. It had all been good, felt good, and he had been comforted, but he still lay awake. Deep down inside him, buried inside his essential willness, he stored the hugs and kisses from tonight next to the memories of Mom when she was Mommy and Dad when he was Daddy. And down there, as deep inside himself as he could go, he put the memory of Kevin in a sack and screaming. And right next to that memory, he found a small, fragile thing like a crystal snowflake. It had a mark down the middle where it had been broken and mended. The mended place looked thick and strong, much stronger than the rest of the thing. And as Will lay there in his room, his now, he thought bitterly, no brother to share it with, he turned the crystal snowflake over and over in his mind, imagined it being wrapped in steel, encased, and made unbreakable. Much, much later, when the rest of the house was silent, police gone and parents in bed, Will quietly got to his feet. Out on the kitchen table, he saw the empty plate and glass and remembered the last thing he'd seen lying on that plate, a severed child's hand holding a magic candle made of suffering. The glass went into the dishwasher, but he threw the plate away, wearing Mom's big oven mitts to handle it. Then he threw the mitts away, too. He got out a fresh plate and glass, filled the one with milk and the other with cookies. Special cookies he'd picked out with Mom. He put the plate and glass on the table, stared at them for a moment, then went quietly to bed. As he got into bed, he reached under his pillow, pulling out something he'd hidden there, hidden from the police and hidden from his parents. When Krampus had whirled to face the Winsel, it had bumped into Will, crushing him to the wall. Will had grabbed the Krampus, not to grapple with it, but as one does when fighting for balance, reflexively grabbing at anything within reach. He had managed not to fall, and had come away from that brief exchange with a little extra something clutched in his hand. He held it up now, looking at it in Spudge Bob's dim glow. A jingle bell, battered and tarnished, nearly the size of a golf ball, and smelling faintly like burning plastic. The surface was slick despite the visible corrosion, and it just felt wrong. Will gave the disgusting little thing a shake. A mournful note rang out, somehow warped and distorted, like a recording being played back too slow, or a finger slowing down a record. In his mind, Krampus looked at him again, Kevin's feet sticking out of the sack on his shoulder, and the Winsel gave him a reproachful look. "I'll not forget you, believer." Will flicked the bell with a fingernail, summoning that tuneless little note. It sounded almost like a sob. I won't forget you either,